In the dense canopy of the heroic woods, the sun seldom kissed the ground. Shadows clung like cobwebs to the gnarled branches and whispered secrets through the rustling leaves. This was where Nathan and Elise, lifelong thrill-seekers and adventurers, decided to challenge the wilderness once more. The couple had heard tales of the wood's uncharted depths from an old innkeeper who cautioned them against straying from known paths. But warnings often fueled their curiosity. The air was damp, carrying a chill that seemed to seep into their bones as they ventured deeper into the forest. The path they followed was barely visible, covered in thick moss and fallen leaves. It was as if the forest itself was trying to reclaim the trail, erasing the footsteps of those who dared to tread it. As they pushed forward, Nathan spotted something odd, a narrow, overgrown trail veering off to the right, hidden by dense underbrush and not marked on any of their maps. "Look at this," he called out, his voice a mix of excitement and unease. Elise approached, her brow furrowed in intrigue. The path had an allure, an unspoken promise of secrets waiting beyond the veil of foliage. After a brief discussion, the allure of discovery overcame their initial hesitation. They decided to see where this forgotten trail might lead. The further they went, the more the forest seemed to close in around them. The trees grew taller, their branches intertwining to form a dark, impenetrable canopy above. The air grew colder, and a pervasive silence enveloped them, broken only by the occasional distant snap of a twig or the eerie call of a raven. The path itself was peculiar, with twists and turns that seemed to follow no natural logic, looping back on itself in a labyrinthine sprawl. Back at the inn, the innkeeper noticed the map left behind on a table. He glanced at it, his eyes widening with recognition as he saw the path they intended to explore. He muttered to himself, his words lost to the empty room. Not again. His hands trembled as he considered the implications. Nathan and Elise felt time dilate, the forest around them growing increasingly oppressive. The trees seemed to whisper in a language lost to man, and the ground beneath their feet felt softer, almost as if it were breathing. Unsettling statues, half hidden by the undergrowth, appeared sporadically along the path. They depicted faces twisted in horror or despair, their eyes hollow and pleading. As the day waned, a dense fog rolled in, swallowing the path and reducing their world to a gray haze. They stumbled upon a clearing where the fog seemed to dance around a solitary, ancient oak. Its trunk was grotesquely large, and faces seemed to form and disappear in the bark. The ground around the oak was littered with old, worn items, watches, glasses, a child's faded shoe, each item carrying a sense of profound loss. The atmosphere thickened with palpable dread. Nathan reached out to touch the tree, drawn by a force he couldn't explain. The moment his hand brushed the bark, the air pulsated with a silent scream that shook them to their core. Elise grabbed him, pulling him back just as the faces in the bark seemed to reach towards him. They realized then that they needed to leave, but the path they had followed was gone, replaced by an impenetrable wall of fog and vegetation. Panic set in as they frantically searched for a way out, the forest seeming to mock their efforts with its stifling silence. Hours turned into a night of terror as they wandered, the sense of being watched growing stronger. Shadows moved just beyond the corner of their vision, and whispers filled the air, speaking in tongues that twisted the mind. They stumbled upon a small, decrepit cabin, half sunken into the earth and covered in moss. The door hung open, inviting them in. Inside, The air was thick with the smell of decay. Old newspapers lined the walls. Their headlines faded, but their message clear, speaking of others who had vanished in these woods. A dusty mirror hung on the wall, and as Nathan gazed into it, he saw not his reflection but a multitude of faces, all twisted in agony, their voices begging him to remember them. They spent a harrowing night in the cabin, every sound magnifying in the silence, every shadow a specter of dread. By morning, they were irrevocably changed. Their memories began to fray at the edges, their sense of self-doubting. Who were they? Why were they here? In the light of dawn, they found the path leading out of the forest, as if the woods had decided to release them from its grasp. They emerged into the world, but something essential was missing. They returned to the inn to retrieve their belongings, but the innkeeper looked through them, his face blank. "Can I help you?" he asked, as if seeing them for the first time. Confused and frightened, they tried to speak to others, but it was as if they had become ghosts, their existence erased from the memory of the world. They wandered, lost not only in place but in time and identity. The trail had indeed led them to another world, a world where they were forgotten, where their pasts were shadows, and their futures uncertain. In their isolation, they turned to each other, their bond forged in the crucible of shared horror. They alone remembered who they were, who they had been. But even those memories were like leaves in the wind, slipping away with each passing day. In the world they once knew, the path in heroic woods faded further, covered by the relentless growth of the forest. And in the clearing around the ancient oak, new items appeared: a camera with no pictures, 2 wedding rings entwined, and a journal with pages full of fading ink, chronicling a journey into the heart of darkness. But no one remembered to read it, and the forest whispered on, its secrets kept, its appetite insatiable.